The state of Texas recently passed a House bill. They called it Doctors Act to ease the regulations for medical licensing. We recently released this video and we got a lot of comments about this. Our inbox is flooded with so many questions. And in this video, I'm going to answer all those questions beginning with how exactly you can apply to this position. So make sure you watch till the end. I'm also going to put my experience and flavor into this so you understand how to approach and be successful with this. The first question is always, how can you apply to this position? The most critical thing in this whole House bill is the fact that you need to have a job offer from a hospital in the state of Texas. This is applicable to all the specialties. Now, you could be a physician, surgeon, pathology, this, that, whatever it is. It's exactly the same process. And also, you could come from any country. Same process. If you have not watched the initial video on the Doctors Act or the House bill, I encourage you to watch this at the end of this video so you get a baseline understanding as to where this video is coming from. Now, let's take a specific example here. Now, let's think of a radiologist who is trained from maybe India. Now, this person has finished their medical training, which is MBBS, from a World Health Organization recognized place. They've completed their residency in radiology. It doesn't matter how much duration your residency is. It doesn't matter what type of degree you have at the end of residency. It doesn't matter whether your residency program is from a hospital that is recognized by World Health Organization or not. But you have finished your radiology residency and now you have a completion certificate. You've been practicing for the last 5 years in that specialty. Now you are a typical candidate to obtain a license from the state of Texas, assuming you got a job. Now what happens if you have not done residency and you have just finished your medical school or medical college? I'll get to that in a bit because the House bill also offers some options for you folks. So keep watching. Alright, now you fit in the classic criteria that you're eligible. The next thing you need to determine is, what position should I be applying to in the state of Texas? Now this could be as a clinical fellowship, this could be directly as an attending physician, or this could be a creation of a completely new category of job. We actually have helped a candidate where this has happened. So it could be any of these categories. So you're going to look at your background and then see, okay, fine. Now this is the position I need to be applying to. So once you make that determination, then accordingly you would create a strong CV, a cover letter, attach all the documents, and then approach the programs or the hospitals. Here is where you would need a lot of experience in order to understand the US healthcare system really well. Sure, if you don't know about this, we are here to guide you. You can always book an appointment with us. The next question is, what type of hospital should you be applying to? If I understand this correctly, the options are quite a lot. It could be a university hospital, a community-based hospital, it could be a freestanding emergency facility, or even an urgent care clinic. Whether the hospital is willing to hire or not, that's a separate thing. But this is what the House bill says. The next question is, when should you apply? It looks like the Doctors Act will kick in September 1 of 2025, which is not far from there. So I would encourage you start exploring the opportunities for obtaining the positions as soon as possible, because in the US, generally obtaining a position can take up to 4 to 6 months. Even if you have your interviews very quickly, the whole paperwork process takes its own time. So I would say the sooner you start, the better it is. The next big question, your favorite, USMLE. Well, in the last video, we said there are a lot of alternatives for USMLE. Yes, the House bill does give many different options for USMLE. In fact, the licensure of Medical Council of Canada is also acceptable. So if you're someone sitting in Canada watching this and you have still not been able to do anything in Canada, now this would be another opportunity where you can explore, assuming you're an eligible candidate. Remember, it is not the licensing that's an issue. It's always the strong application and would the hospital be willing to take you in would be the biggest factor. Now, what happens if you don't have any exams? Well, in that case, based on my experience, I can tell you, you must come with a strong application and demonstrate you're an outstanding candidate so the hospital decides to hire you in spite of no exams. And this can happen not only in the state of Texas, in all 50 states. Okay, keep that in mind. The next question is, how much experience do you need in your specialization to be eligible? Well, we talked about this. The expectation is you need to have at least 5 years of experience as a specialist in your home country that would make you eligible to obtain this license, assuming you do get a job. So the next big question is, what happens if you do not have any residency or PG training from your home country? Now the House bill does add a clause that if you come from a country where you can directly practice after medical school or medical college and a residency is not always required, then they do have the option of being eligible for this provisional licensure. Here, the House bill says you need to have at least 10 years of experience after your medical school. So what this means is you would still complete your medical school or medical college from a World Health Organization recognized place. And if your country, for example in India, you can directly practice after medical college, unlike in the US where you must do a residency. In those cases, you would still be eligible to apply for a licensure, assuming you got a job. Now the biggest challenge for you folks would be, who is that hospital who can give you a job with no specialization? Has this happened? Yes, this has happened. So the next big question is there any other exams required? Yes, you're expected to be proficient in English, and I presume this would be demonstrated by a completion of an English proficiency test. They do not specify what proficiency test, or they may have at some place in the House bill, at least it was not obvious to me, but I would assume it's most likely going to be OET or the Occupational English Test. Alright, the next question. Will this position offer you a pay? Yes, I would think this would be a paid position because you're doing clinical work. And the next question is, how much will the pay be? I could not say that because the pay would depend on what hospital you've been hired to and what kind of job position you're doing. For example, you're hired as a clinical fellow, your salary would be quite different compared to if you're hired as an attending physician. So it really depends on what position you land in. But bottom line, these positions would be paid, and typically would be paid good enough that you can support yourself and your family. Unless there are any exceptions. Well, there could be exceptions, but let's wait and see how this folds. The next question. Is this position only for US citizens or green card holders? No, it's not. Essentially, you could be a US citizen, you could be a green card holder, or you could be anyone from any country. As long as you're eligible to work in the US, you fall under the category of being eligible. You may not even have visited the US before. You may not even have a visitor visa in the US. I think it should be fine based on what I read of the House bill and my interpretation of what it says. So, bottom line, any of you international medical graduate would be eligible to obtain a licensure, assuming you got it, job. Next question. You obtain a research fellowship in the state of Texas in a hospital. Would this qualify as a job for a provisional license? No, it does not. Your position has to be a clinical job, and research jobs do not qualify under this category. The next question is, how long should you be working in this position before you get a full license in the state of Texas? So it sounds like, or it looks like, there is a maximum of 3 years that you need to work. To me, it sounds like there is a maximum of 3 years on a provisional license that you could be before you become eligible to obtain a full state license in the state of Texas. This is what the House bill says, but from my personal experience, I can tell you there would be quite a few exceptions to this. Next question is, are there any country-specific restrictions? Not to my knowledge. The House bill at least does not specify any country-specific restrictions. They just say it must be a recognized medical college or medical school. So I assume every country outside of the US and Canada should be eligible for this. Because Canada follows a different path, the US is US. Hence, I mentioned outside of US and Canada. Is this only good for medical doctors or even dental doctors are eligible would be the next question. I did not see any mention of dentists in the House bill, so I assume all this is applicable for only the medical doctors. Although I do see an exception, which is oral and maxillofacial surgery. The dental training, as far as I know, would stay the same pathway that you would follow the ADA CAPIT path and then applied for advanced standing dentistry. We do have a dental expert on our team. If you're a dentist watching this, you're more than welcome to book an appointment with her, and she will be more than happy to guide you with your next steps. The next question is, can any criteria in the House bill change, or can the House bill change itself? I would not be surprised if any of this changes at any time. So the disclaimer is, I'm telling you guys what I think is applicable as of today at the time of me recording this, but keep a watch on the recent development because things tend to change and we've seen this happen. The next question is, where can I find jobs that are advertised for this position? This is a great question. You're not going to find anything advertised specific for this. That is not going to happen. And I say this based on my own experience. Of course, the House bill doesn't say this. Now, the way you would approach this is, as I said in the beginning, you need to see what your background is and what position you might be eligible for, and then approach it that way. You can spend hours together on the website, but you're not going to find a single position that is going to say, oh, you could train from your home country. Have you finished residency? You have 5 years experience? Sure, come and apply to us. Nope, that's not going to happen. So be very proactive, understand the system, and then approach. Of course, you're not sure how to proceed. We are here for you. You can always book an appointment with us for guidance, and this can be done on our website, www.imgsecrets.com, either with me or one of our experts. We would be more than happy to help you with this. The next question is everything just automated? Well, in other words, do the hospitals are willing to accept candidates because this new law would come into effect in September of 2025? No, it does not. You have to understand, the hospitals are autonomous to make decisions whether they need to hire candidates or not. Of course, the hospitals can always reap the benefits of this law if they find an eligible candidate to help him or her obtain a license. But the hospitals do not have to proactively be very aggressive about finding candidates. So, in spite of all this, remember this, you would still be faced with intense competition, and you have to be extremely aggressive and smart in terms of how you approach. Just because these new laws come in, just because there is a shortage, doesn't mean you're going to get a position unless you have a very strong application and background. Okay? Making sense? When people sit with me one-on-one and ask me questions like, when there is so much shortage of doctors, why just not the hospital directly hire us? Well, the analogy I give is, just because an airline is flying with empty seats, they're not going to sell the tickets for $1. They would rather keep up their reputation and fly instead of selling them for low price. It's kind of the same thing here. They're okay with having staff shortages unless they feel like they're getting an outstanding candidate. Only then they're going to absorb them. Making sense? So be very cautious in terms of approaching, because even some of the strong candidates fail to get positions. It's not that easy. So you need to be very aggressive in terms of finding the positions. Next, I encourage you to watch this full video where I've explained the House Bill 2038 from Texas, which is also called the Doctors Act, so you understand where all this is coming from, because this is important for you to understand what I said in this video. And I've also left the link in the description below. Any questions, do post in the comments below. Take care, stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.